Hello and welcome back to today's session with AI with Maribel Lopez. As always, I'm excited to be talking to leaders in industry about what's changing. Today, I'm being joined by David Singer, who is the Global Vice President and Go-to-Market Strategy at Verint. I've had the pleasure of knowing David for a while. David, thank you for joining the program.
Thanks for having me on. It's always a pleasure to chat, and I think this one's going to be a lot of fun.
So one of the things that's been so interesting is there's a lot of rapid change going on in the AI landscape, but I know that all the companies I talk to, they're really wondering, how do you get started fast with AI? How do you do it well? How do you not make any mistakes?
Right.
So I thought maybe we could get started as a level setting
Sure.
of talking about what's happening with AI, especially with the evolution from generative AI to agentic AI. Everything was generative at the beginning of last year. Everything's agentic at the beginning of this year. So big changes.
Yeah. So I think the way I like to think about it is it's an evolution, not a change in direction.
Yeah.
Right? So generative AI is really good at answering questions, right? It understands what you're saying, can look at knowledge or content sources and synthesize answers, and it makes that whole conversation flow, development and construction much easier. But generative AI on its own doesn't do anything, right? It'll say, hey, here's what you should do, and then it kind of stops. Agentic AI is the extension of generative to also be able to take action and act as an agent, right? So it allows now the generative AI says, hey, you should, cancel the credit card, refund the last three purchases, and ship a new one. Now, the agentic extension would say, right, to do that, I need to interface to system 1, 2, and 3, take these actions, and I'll do it for you. So now you don't have to explicitly ask to do things. You don't have to have a human in the loop every time to do it. And the important thing is that it's about the autonomous decision-making and action. It's not purely rules-based, right? Because I could say, if I use my bank's IVA and say, I'd like to transfer money from account A to account B. Well, it took an action for me, but that's not agentic because it's not autonomous. It's doing exactly what it was told. It doesn't understand a conversation and say, oh, based on this, do you want me to ba, 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 and then goes and do it for you. So it's really that extension of generative to take the action it recommends.
Okay, and this I think is a really interesting discussion. I want to ask you how you're thinking about this in your product, but before I get there, I want to talk a little bit more about what you said with the autonomous nature, right? Mm-hmm. So agentic implies autonomous, but can we talk about how much autonomy is required for this to deliver results for your organizations? I know there's a lot of discussion around from a buyer's standpoint. Do I want autonomous or don't I? How do I think about security and identity and regulatory issues in autonomous agent land, right? So give me your perspective on what happens with autonomous. Like, how are you thinking about that?
Right. So I think it gets to autonomous. It doesn't start at autonomous. Right? You need a human in the loop for training. You want to trust, was it trust but verify, right? You want to make sure that it's doing the right things on a consistent basis. So I think you call it, like security and identity and regulatory requirements. I mean, that's evolving all the time. Like knowing who the customer is and having a secure channel is table stakes, even for an IVA or a chat session to a human. You need to know who they are and have secure connection. The regulations are evolving all the time. There's all kinds of especially coming out of Europe or Canada, as I guess the European adjacent part of North America, about, there must be human in the loop for training. There must be the ability to turn off. You can't make, biometric or lie detector type decisions autonomously without a human in the loop. So it's important to be aware of all these things. I think you start with the simpler transactions. You don't want to start with, I'm going to autonomously cancel your life insurance policy. That would be a very dangerous first step, for example. But like any AI tech, like any automation tech, you want to start with a human in the loop, monitor for accuracy and efficacy, and then slowly you reduce that from every time to, or maybe not slowly, at your pace, you reduce that from every time to spot check to starting to use other mechanisms to evaluate it. So one of the things that gets really interesting now, I think, is quality monitoring used to be exclusively for human agents. You didn't need to do quality monitoring on AI agents or IVAs or chatbots, because when they're rules based, they do the same thing every time. So you don't need to evaluate what they're doing. You know what they're doing. Now that using generative AI to come up with your answers and determine what should be done, and then agentic to go and do things and then reply back with what it did, well, now it's not going to say the same thing every time. It's going to make decisions and do things. So you can apply quality monitoring practices to make sure you monitor your agentic agents the same way you monitor human agents. And now that there are AI tools to automate 100% coverage of quality, you can do that. If you had to hire 1,000 supervisors to listen to every self-service transaction, it would fall down. But now you can bring that kind of security and auditability by using the techniques you've used for human agents on your AI agents, which I think is a really interesting pivot to what's going on.
So that's actually part of the progression that you were talking about as we
Yeah.
think of generative AI, as we think of agentic AI. Part of what you would have to consider putting in the platform for organizations to actually get into this next agentic world. Any other things we should think about like how you thought about this from a product standpoint, or what had to be included that was different than what they might have had before?
Sure. So I think the key word is the agent part of agentic, right? Because when you focus on that, you start thinking about, now I've got, silicon-based employees and carbon-based employees, right? I got, AI employees and I got human employees. So you would never put a human employee on the floor if they didn't go through training and have access to the policy and procedure manual and a good knowledge base, and have certain tools they could use. And until they're a certain seniority level, they don't get access to the next ability to execute transactions. And you do quality monitoring, and you look at performance management, and you look at workforce management. The more the AI agents get to that level of autonomy, we like to think about, how do we apply those practices to the AI agents, right? Scheduling's a little different because they can be on all the time, but they need to be aware, I can only execute a wire transfer during these hours. I can't do it later. So, schedule the activities they can do. Quality monitoring we talked about. Performance management lets you monitor how is performance going, where do I need to change what's happening. Giving them access to the right knowledge. You point, your generative AI at the right knowledge source, so it's not answering based on the internet. So I really think how we effectively manage human employees is the right mental model to think about what's the analog for each of these functions for your AI agents, and build and evolve and manage them that way.
Yeah, and I think you actually have started to answer what was my next question. And from where I sit, we've seen so many companies that have had AI proof of concepts and they failed. Right. And there's a bunch of reasons that one's AI proof of concepts could fail. But as you've been talking to organizations, what advice do you have for customers?
Really, and I think this is going to cover, this is going to be my recurring theme. So this is my soapbox pitch is have a purpose, have an outcome in mind before you start, right? A lot of AI POCs and experiments started because AI was new and it was fun, and we gotta put this thing into our organization. And it's a lot easier to build AI POCs than it is to do a lot of other sort of raw coding kind of stuff. But the example I always use is, what are you trying to do? Well, I need hot water in my house. Okay, how many people do I have? Well, I've got 2 adults and 2 kids who are now teenagers and now young adults. And we have a dishwasher, and my daughter takes hour-long showers. So, okay, my requirement is hot water. I have this situation, so I need a tankless heater, not a small tank. So I don't start from what are all of the hot water options available. Right. I
Right,
start from
right.
what do I need? I need
Yeah.
enough hot water for this situation, and then it drives what I'm doing. So similarly for an organization is what are you trying to accomplish? Are you trying to be the CX leader in your space? Okay, that's going to drive one set of actions. Are you trying to increase revenue per call? Are you trying to reduce handle times? Are you trying to increase employee wellness and say, okay, I want to increase employee handle time? Great. So there are 4 or 5 different ways you can do that. So then I'd say instead of looking at tech, look at solutions. There's a difference between buying AI tech and buying an AI solution focused on an outcome. And, I'll ask you, how many times have you heard customers or organizations say, why is that a problem? I don't need to buy that. I can just throw some Gen AI at that data and it'll be fine.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Maybe. At the end of the day, we're using Gen AI to come up with answers. The really tricky part is the last mile, right? Now that you have that, how do you get that in a secure way to every agent on the floor, plus your AI agents, and make sure it's monitored and supported and trained and everything else? So coming back to your question, before to start an effective POC, think of what outcome am I trying to achieve first? Where can I get a solution that delivers that outcome? And how can I try that for one small subset of the full deployment, right? And that may be for 100 agents versus 1,000 agents. That may be I want to try it on one conversation flow in my IVA, not replace the entire IVA. It may be I want to give answers from one set of knowledge, not everything. But there's always a way to start small. Prove the concept, right? But with a solution. You're proving the solution, not the tech. We know what Gen AI does. But can the solution deliver that outcome to your agents in production at scale? Start small and then grow.
I love the start small concept because it actually makes it very manageable. Some
Yes.
of the challenges that we've had in the past is this whole discussion of, okay, we've got a strategy. We want to transform our customer experience. It's like, yes, you do want to transform your
Yes.
customer experience, but you can't do all that in one day, right? So you have to break
Right.
it up into chunks of what are you going to
Right.
transform within that. And to your point, with this start small as well, you also get the opportunity to prove out the technology because generative can be generative and maybe it
Yeah.
generates something you like, maybe it generates the incorrect thing.
Right.
So you have to be very thoughtful about understanding like what that generative is going to look like and is it delivering the value you want, which gets back to the other discussion you had earlier about making sure that there's some format of observability that goes with that so you know how it's
Absolutely.
performing,
Yeah.
right? And I think this is actually one of the topics I think that we've not discussed enough within the AI landscape. If you think of other places where we've decided to do autonomous things, I spent a lot of time working in the networking field, so wired and
Sure.
wireless LANs infrastructure within companies. And the idea was we were going to automate all the network configuration and all the changes
Right.
and the security aspects of it. And there was that moment of terror where it's like, well, our network could go horribly wrong and we don't want to do that. So we had to give people smaller examples like, okay, here's the alert, here's what we think you should
Right.
do. And by the time you've done it 5 times, you're like, sure, I can automate that, right? But we also gave them visibility into what was happening. So I think
Right.
what you're talking about here is that visibility so that you know that what you've started with, it's well scoped, you can figure out if it's working well, you can land and expand is what I always say to companies with AI
Yeah.
that I think is really important.
Yeah.
So let's circle back because you have been working with a lot of customers on this, and
Sure.
I'm really curious to see, what are some of the AI use cases that have proven successful as these starting points, and why do they work well for organizations?
Sure. Absolutely. And before I answer that, I'm going to one word you used I love and I should have used it earlier is observability. Right? It's key to a lot of the regulations coming out and is key to driving to success. And observability starts to mean different things as things become more generative and autonomous. So thinking about that is really important. So I just want to hammer on that word because I really like it. But I think a good way to start that I've seen with customers is pick workflows and processes that you have today and then bring AI to automate and make them more efficient. And the reason that works is because there's less change management. It's saying, hey, take something you're doing and make it better or easier versus learn to do a new thing. right? And there's much more institutional knowledge of how that works. And so it can be a really good way to get started in a way that's very manageable and understandable. So three of the ones we'll see very often are, one is wrap up for call, summarization for call wrap up, right? Agents are already taking notes and typing them into their CRM or their sales system of record or wherever it goes. No one likes to do it. They're generally varying quality. So if you give agents at the end of a call, hey, here's the suggested wrap-up notes for you. Well, that's great. Now we're taking work off their plate. Everybody wants to adopt a solution that gives them less work to do. And it's automating a process that nobody likes but happens everywhere. So that tends to be a good place to start. Everybody has, or most organizations have, an old voice IVR that they hate. But it probably has 200-300 call flows in it that have evolved over time, and saying, all right, tomorrow I'm going to move all of it to here. That's massive. But to say, hey, the top 2 call flows that have value to my customers are, A and B, bill payment and first notice of loss, or whatever it is. Right. Let's take those. We know what people need to do. We know what their experience is. Let's just move those 2 call flows to an agentic IVA and have it sit behind your IVR and automate that. So again, you know what you need to do. You know what your problems are. You know what your customer experience needs to be. So it's a very contained problem. And the third one is quality management. Right? Everybody's doing some level of call listening and scoring and reporting, but it's, they're generally manually listening to somewhere between 0.5 to 3% of the calls, which is definitely not enough for any compliance or regulatory, observability. It's not even enough to make good performance decisions. So applying, AI to automate that process and deliver insights to supervisors, again, it's a great place to start because it's a well understood process. People need to do it. It's a lot of effort, and that can give them time back in their day. So I've seen those 3 be really good places to start because it's a well understood problem by the organization. There's obvious value to it, and people understand what the AI should be doing.
Yeah, I seem to recall you and I having a discussion with one of your customers said that they were actually receiving significant benefits in terms of saving with, supervisors and AI quality monitoring. So I think
Yeah.
there's a lot of opportunity there. And what I liked about what you said about it is there's two parts to that. So one is like it's something that everybody does, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's something that everybody would like to do better. So it's a really good example of, you go from like 1 or 2% to near 100% of the calls are monitored. That's just like a huge upgrade right there.
Right.
Then there's opportunity to layer on the concept of like, okay, you've monitored them, but then like what kind of actioning do you want to take around them once you have a better handle of what is or what isn't working? Because we as organizations all think we know what's working, but sometimes when you actually see the data, you
Right.
get some fundamentally new insight that can help. So it's a good example of something that you are already doing that you can do better and that can give you another value add down the pipe. So I think those are good ways to think of how you structure what you do with AI.
Absolutely. And what's I find fascinating about that, and I've started to see these kind of ancillary benefits in a few cases, but with quality, for example, when we first deployed our automated and AI-powered quality years ago, the big fear was, agents are going to hate this, right? I don't want a robot evaluating me. I want I need a human to evaluate me. The agents preferred it because it was unbiased, it was fair, it was objective, right? And it got rid of the whole objections like, oh yeah, I'm getting coached on missing my disclosures, but that was Wednesday morning and my kid was sick Tuesday night. So yeah, it was a bad morning, but I never make that mistake. So I'm just going to ignore the coaching. Well, now it's objective, it's fair. You don't get supervisors love you or hate you. So it ended up increasing employee experience as well as the supervisor capacity. And we all know employee experience is the number 1 driver of customer experience. So outside of just better coaching, everything got better. So when you start to see these benefits, it increases people's willingness to adopt the next solution because they see, it's not just trying to make things better for the company. It makes it also better for the employee and for the customer. And when you can do all three at the same time, that's your win.
I
Sorry, I
think these are
apologize for
very
that long.
hard jobs. No, these are really
Yeah.
hard jobs, right?
Mhm.
And we have a lot of attrition in the field, right? So
Mhm.
how do we make sure that we can retain employees? How do we make sure that we've made their jobs easier so that they
Mhm.
can be more customer
Yeah.
facing? I think ideally we all want to do that, but structurally it's been complicated to do.
Mhm.
So there is opportunity for AI to assist with that. So I love pulling in that concept
Yeah.
of what it does for the employee as opposed to just, the bottom line of the company, because
Right.
I think we have had many variants of technology over time that have been
Mhm.
about driving
Mhm.
employee productivity. And sometimes when you
Yeah.
go talk to a customer, they're like, okay, what technology have I deployed since the dawn of time that hasn't supposed to have given me more productivity? Like, what else have you got for me?
Right.
What
Right.
else can you give me, right? And I think there's great opportunity to show the what
Mhm.
else in this discussion.
Mhm.
Um, what I was going to ask you
Sure.
is because you're out talking to a lot of companies, we know that everybody's evaluating AI solutions and vendors,
Mhm.
but what are some of the things that you tell companies that they should be looking for, the different types of criteria they should be considering when they're evaluating
Mhm.
solutions? Because there are a lot of things we could look
Yeah.
at.
Absolutely. I really think the number one thing people should look at is the ability for your vendor to deliver proven outcomes at scale, right? The everybody will talk about their large language models and their training and their tech, and that's great, right? That is it's table stakes, right? Everybody needs to have a good language model. Everybody needs to have it trained on the right data. What you want to see before you start is the vendor you're working with, can they show you that they've done it? Do they have proven outcomes and proven outcomes at scale? I always say, POCs are easy, production is hard, right? Proving something in a lab, that's one thing, but saying, hey, you want to buy, wrap up, you want to buy quality, you want to buy, real time automated AI powered coaching. Great. Where have you done this before? I deployed to, brand X for 15,000 agents and delivered a 25% reduction in handle time while improving agent experience. Here's a reference. I think that is the number one thing people should be looking at because tech is fun, outcomes matter.
Well, and the interesting thing about your point too, we do get as technologists extremely enamored with the technology itself, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the technology, to your point, is not the outcome. The technology
Right.
is just the means to the end, right? So first, it
Yeah.
has to be, is this the right technology for what you're trying to do,
Mm-hmm.
right? Getting back to your
Right.
first original, like, what are your scoped use cases? If you think about the toolbox, it's like sometimes you need a hammer, sometimes you need a screwdriver, sometimes you need an impact driver, right? And this
Right.
can,
Yeah.
when you look
Absolutely.
at like large language models, it's
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, sometimes you need that large language model, sometimes you need a
Mm-hmm.
small specialized model, right? So there's
Right.
lots of different options, and you you have to know, kind of what you're looking for, but
Right.
also what that value is going to deliver.
Right.
Because I think the big change that we've had, probably in the past year especially, is the move from I'm just going to see what the technology can do to I need to have a specific outcome that this is going to
Right.
achieve to prove the return for the money I'm going to invest in it because
Right.
money isn't growing on trees. People are
Right.
just not being handed AI budgets to go see what they could do.
Yeah.
They have
Yeah.
to do something with it, right? So I think
Right.
that's very important.
Right. And absolutely. And I think as a company looking to buy AI, do I want to spend my time thinking about is Anthropic better than OpenAI? Is better than Grok? And you know what is the upcoming regulation coming out of Germany that's going to filter down to like it's complex and there's a lot of decisions. And at the end of the day, the proof of making the right decisions is the outcomes you can deliver in production.
I
So
absolutely agree with that.
that's I come back to this the one thing to look at. The rest it implies and pulls along everything else you need.
Makes perfect sense. Okay, so
Mhm.
given that the landscape's changing all the time,
Sure.
the vendors in the landscape are changing all the
Mhm.
time. So I wanted to ask you a question about Verint specifically. What's
Sure.
something you think people should know about Verint, or a misconception about Verint that you'd like to correct either of those? Something they should know or a
Yeah.
misconception?
So I'll start with, generally people will think of, or too often people think of Verint as, oh, you're the call recording and WFM guys, right? Um,
What you do.
we do that.
Yeah.
And right, it's the what
And
improv rules. Yes,
yeah.
and
Mhm.
yes, and that has allowed us to evolve into an AI outcomes company. Right? I know you've seen Dan, our CEO, speak a number of times, and our focus is on, we've had AI as part of our platform for a decade or more, right? We've built our analytics on AI before, Gen AI changed the public perception. We'd already been building our AI pipelines. Everything we do on the platform is powered by or informed by data and AI. And we're laser focused on delivering outcomes to customers with AI. So if you look at the scope of what we deliver, we have, agentic self-service. We have, agentic AI for agents. We have AI-powered coaching. We have, voice of the customer. We have full scope of desktops and channels. So what we really do at this point is, we've evolved from call recording to workforce optimization to workforce engagement to where we are now, which is CX automation, which is all the evolution of what we're doing. And we're really focused on delivering those AI-powered outcomes to our customers. And it's so much more than just call recording and WFM.
Okay, so I had a couple other questions, but I think in the context of the last two answers that you did, I'm going to go
Sure,
to the end of what my questions would be, and because we talked
sure.
about what criteria you think people feel should be
Mm-hmm,
important,
mm-hmm,
and how we're going to be really outcomes driven. So given that, that's sort of the advice. But
mm-hmm.
as organizations scale these AI efforts beyond the initial wins, what do
Sure.
you think they should be thinking about in the future?
So I can answer that in two ways. What do you think about from a technology perspective and from a human change management perspective as things evolve? From
Got
a
it.
technology perspective, after saying for the last half hour that the tech doesn't matter to the outcomes, let's talk about why the tech matters, right? Is when you think about how much the AI landscape has changed since, what was it, October, November 22, when ChatGPT really hit the market in a big way, and everybody's minds were blown and everything changed. There's been like 7 evolutions or revolutions since then. So think about there will be a new model, a new capability, a new concept in 6 months. Think about picking vendors and solution providers who have a proven track record of being able to quickly integrate and adapt to the evolutions in the space and continue to bring that to their customers without ripping and replacing everything. So think about the proven ability of your providers to incorporate changes in evolution technology without breaking everything it did for you before. So we don't know what's coming in 6 months, but speaking for Verint, I know that as we went from first generation generative to second to RAG to agentic, we've embedded this platform every step of the way and added value to our customers without breaking what we did before. So think about that kind of technology change management that your solution providers have to take care of. Then there's human and process change management on your side. So the reason I like the start small approach with a couple of dimensions I talked about is it starts to give your employees confidence that these are going to things that will help them, not just another, oh, you push another desktop app. I don't want to, I can work faster on my green screen than I click on a mouse. So I don't want to make that change. So if you think about, deploying first things that will help people do what they're already doing, build their confidence in the AI approach, and then scale out from there. Then you tend to make your change management easier. It also lets you build internal champions, right? It's I look at our TimeFlex capability that gives agents the ability to autonomously manage their schedules while improving service levels. It's great. So, but it's scary, right? Now we're telling these managers that you don't have absolute control over schedules anymore. But trust us, everything gets better. Well, you deploy that for a couple of teams. And now all of a sudden everyone who knows them is going like, hey, when do I get that? I need that. And the teams that have it say, you can have this when you tear it out of my cold, dead hands, right? Yeah. So when you deploy first in a way that really helps people, they become internal advocates and change advocates for rolling it out more broadly. And it builds that acceptance that next time you had the next use case and the next outcome, the next capability, they're like, well, the last two were great. I can't wait for the next one, right? So I think about change management that way from, build that internal support and championship and look to your solution providers to have a proven record of absorbing the changes in the AI landscape.
I love the way that you really framed both aspects of the change. And I know I've had a lot of discussions with different enterprise buyers, and one of the things that's come up pretty consistently in the issues that they have is, in fact, change management. And both of the things that you spoke about, one, the pace and evolution of technology is difficult, and you need to be able to be flexible to that. And that's a really easy thing for an industry analyst to say, oh, you need to be flexible, you need to be agile, you need to do change management. But the practicalities of that are quite difficult. And then the other thing is the human aspect of it, particularly as it relates to AI, has been quite the challenge, and needing to have multiple levels of buy-in, executive buy-in in terms of the fact that they want to do it, they want to fund it and give support for it, and they will, back people up with it. But then also those internal group by group champions that are going to help really drive the adoption within their groups has actually been a secondary challenge that I don't think we really spend enough time thinking about. So both of those aspects of change are good. So thank you for that. Any closing comments of things you'd like to leave the audience with?
I'll say two things. One, to just wrap up on what we were just talking about for change management. The worst thing you can do is spend a lot of money on new tech and new solutions and then use them to do exactly what you did before.
Right? Not so much with the reimagining.
Right? So, hey, we're going to deploy this great AI summary for wrap up. And then we're going to let agents edit it to put their own voice on it, and they take more time than they did writing the notes themselves, right? So that change management to adopt and change behaviors, trust the tech after you've proven it, is critical. So that don't just buy stuff and do the same thing. You've got to let the change happen. Is one. And the second, because I said it's my broken record, soapbox and speaker's corner speech. Think about outcomes first, right? That should drive where you start. It should drive your vendor selections. It should drive your start small and grow. It should drive your change management. What are the outcomes you need to achieve? Start there, and everything else follows.
Makes perfect sense. David, I want to thank you for your time and for sharing your insight. And as always, I look forward to seeing what the industry builds next, but I look forward to seeing what your customers do with your technology. Thanks again for joining us.
Thanks for having me on. It's always a pleasure, Maribel.